Hello, my name is Ethan Denny-Broker. I am the Chef de Cuisine at Owamni here in Minneapolis. Today we are going to be breaking down a duck and making a blueberry brine for it. So first things first, we're going to turn this on. We're going to add 2 quarts of water. Then we're going to take 1 cup of salt. We're going to take a cup of maple syrup. Save that for later. So, then we're going to take 1 onion, cut it in half, take the skin off. Everything that's in this brine is indigenous to North America. So I'm just going to take this, I'm going to put this in the water. And we're going to take a stem with roughly 8 or 9 sage leaves. Throw that in there. We're going to take laurel bay leaves for more flavor. Then we're going to take the garlic. And we're just going to give it a little smash so that it opens up the flavor and adds a lot of the garlic flavor to it. And then we're going to take a 1/4 cup of juniper berries. And we're just going to bring this up to a rolling boil to let the salt dissolve and all the flavors come together. You have a lot of fragrant items in here. The juniper berry, the sage, the garlic. Maple has a distinct flavor, and then the red onions are very potent. We're also going to add a pint of blueberries. I usually like to brine my duck for roughly 24 to 36 hours. Sometimes 48 hours, depending on the event or dish that we're doing. Being the Chef de Cuisine at Owamni, it is my job to be my chef's right-hand man. I should be able to do everything that he does and more. So I oversee menu making with him. We do a lot of R&Ding because we change menus, every 3 months, every 4 months, depending on the season. And, just coming up with new and innovative ideas for indigenous cooking. I also manage roughly 25 to 30 employees a day. It's just fun as a culinary student that went to a French cooking school to be using my expertise now in indigenous cooking and going back to the roots of my family. My dad's from Leech Lake Reservation, and so I just like to be able to showcase the food that I wasn't really shown growing up. Being able to use the ingredients that my ancestors once had and used is, it brings life to this culinary journey of mine. So we got this going up to a rapid boil. We're going to let it boil for a couple minutes. So I usually cook this for about 15 to 20 minutes after it starts to boil, just because you got to get the onions cooked a little, make them soft enough for the blender. You got to soften up the juniper berries, and just really letting it steep really brings out the flavors of all these ingredients. And as you look in the pot here, you can kind of see that, the water itself has changed colors because the blueberries, the juniper berries, and, the red onion itself are all purple, red, blue colors. But this is a good brine to use on duck, turkey, any wild game. I'm going to turn it off. I'll bring this over here. And I'm going to puree the onions, some of the juniper berries, not all of them. Now we're going to pour a little bit of the water in here. So now that we got that pureed and blended up, we're just going to add it to this Cambro here. And then we're going to add this to the Cambro. So I didn't blend everything up just because, you know, the juniper berries, they're flavorful, but you don't want it to be too overpowering. So I didn't add all the juniper berries. The garlic's in there for flavor, whether it's blended up or not. Same with the sage. So now that we have the brine already, we're going to take about 2 quarts of ice, the same amount of water in weight, or quarts, so that we can cool this down faster, but it also adds more moisture to it. So we're going to take this. And give it a little stir. And we're just going to let this sit for about 20 minutes. And I'm going to break down the duck and we'll be right back. So here we have, it's a Peking duck breast. We get these from Wild Acres in Cross Lake, Minnesota. This is where all of our ducks, turkeys, and usually goose come from. It's smaller than normal, but it has packs a lot of flavor. So we're just going to go ahead and break it down. We're going to take the legs, thighs, and the oysters off in the back. And we're going to remove the breast, trim it up, and then add it to our brine. Some people start with the breast. Some people start by taking off the legs. But what I like to do is I just like to make a slit right here because there's just fat here. This is where you can separate the leg from the breast. Yeah. So then I'm gonna come on this side, do the same thing. You know, you can make little slow incisions, but as you see, you can pull it away. And both sides are free from the top part of the breast or the breastplate carcass here. So then what I like to do now that I have that done, I go down the middle of the sternum here, the breast, make a little incision. You can see the bone here, cartilage. And you just want to follow the breastplate all the way to the back. If you want, you can remove all this fat in the neck. Set that aside for stock. So then you're just going to come down here. You're going to follow the wishbone here. Right here. And you're just going to move slow motions, making sure you remove all of the meat. Some left behind is okay, but you want to try to get as much as you can. And then you come down to that spot where you already cut. Just trim it along here. And with this, we're just gonna trim that off. Trim that off. Trim that off. And trim that. Tenderloin is still intact here. I'll flip that over. So then you're gonna come to this side and do the same thing. Right along that Right there. Come here. Nice slow movements, especially if this is your first time. It is good practice going slow. And like I said, you're going to come along the wishbone, duck wishbone. So you can find ducks, either hunt your own, which, if you're into hunting, it's a nice, cheap way to get a duck. Otherwise, some local supermarkets sell ducks. They're usually frozen. You can talk to your local butcher. Sometimes they get ducks in. But yeah, it's just depends on where you are, how much work you're willing to put in to either, go hunt the duck, or if you'd just rather go to the store, buy one, and do it that way. This one, nice and trimmed up. So then, now that we have that apart, and take the wings here, and just go right down, snap it, wing. Do the same thing on this side. Wing. So then with this, you're going to kind of, flip it over, detach this fat. It's unnecessary. But once you have it flipped over, there's two, they're called little oysters right here, duck oysters. Very tender and delicious piece of meat. So you're just going to come here, run along the spine. We got that. And you're just going to follow that all the way along the thigh. And here you have part of the thigh. You have the oyster here. And then the leg. And we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on this side. Find that oyster. Just run it along the spine. And then this one you can trim up just because there's excess fat. The fat is delicious, but we don't need all of it. So then we have that one. So with the fat, you can usually, take this, put it in some water, render it down, and then you cool it down, skim off the fat, and there you have some duck fat to cook with. Or you can fry it up in the fryer, make little duck skin croutons, duck skin, chips. Just depends on, what you want to do with it. And then we save this and we make stock out of this. So we'll take all of our bones and carcasses and, extra skin and stuff that we have. We'll throw it in the pot with mirepoix. And, we let it go for 36 to 48 hours cooking time, just so it really brings out that depth of flavor. But now that we have the duck all deconstructed, we're going to take the brine that we made earlier, make sure it's cool. So we're just going to take it and submerge it in. And sometimes I like to float to the top. So you can put a plate on it, you can put plastic wrap just on the top to cover it down, or if you have a small enough sheet pan that you can set on top. All right. We're going to clean off our butcher block here. And you can use wood cutting boards for meat, for stuff like that. As long as you use soapy water, you clean it up right away and you just don't let it sit. Just because, you should be able to use this cutting board for anything, not just vegetables, not just fruit. It should be able to be used for a little bit of everything. Just Make sure you clean it, take care of it, season it when needs. You can eat duck at medium rare, medium, which is what I like to eat it at. And the texture of it it's kind of more tougher than chicken, but at the same time it's more succulent and juicier than chicken because the duck fat helps keep it moisturized as it's cooking. So what we're going to do now is we are going to grab a saute pan. We're going to sear up one of the breasts, and I'm going to show you what to do before you sear the breast. So with duck fat, if you don't cook it long enough or render it long enough, it's very chewy and you could choke on it. So one of the things that you get taught in culinary school or any kitchen that serves duck is you want to score the duck fat. So you're just going to take the duck breast, make incisions. Don't go too deep because you don't want to hit the skin. You just want to be able to go through the fat. You do it like that, and then we go across one more time. There you see that, it cuts the duck skin into squares, but it also will help render out the fat because the heat will get in between the cracks and melt the duck fat that's closer to the skin. That way you don't have to worry about choking on duck fat. And one thing you want to make sure to do before searing a duck breast is dry the fat part off. Just because when you put it in the pan, it will, putting water in a hot pan is not always fun. So you just want to make sure you get off as much moisture on the fat side as possible so it creates that nice golden crust. I personally don't add fat to the pan just because, duck's a very fatty poultry bird. So I'm just going to take it in here. We're going to do that and, just let it render out the fat. It's not going to set off anything, is it? So you can see the steam and smoke coming off of it, so your pan's hot. When you see smoke coming up like that, just remove it from the heat for a minute. Let the pan cool down to a normal temperature. You can see the smoke going away. So that means the pan's not as hot anymore, but you can see all the duck fat that has rendered out already. So we're just going to let that render on a lower heat. So we're just going to look at the breasts. You might think it looks burnt, but this is the caramelization from that brine. The maple in it, all the blueberries, all the natural sugars coming out from the blueberries. So don't be alarmed if it's like that. You can, start to see the duck fat, come through. So then we're just going to cook that for about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the size of your duck breast. And another thing you can do as it cooks is, just baste it, because then as this hot oil hits the top of the skin, it's also going to keep rendering the fat that didn't get rendered out. And it helps cook it at the same time because the oil in the pan is hot enough to cook the top of the fat and the top of the duck that was exposed when we scored the duck. So like I said, I prefer my duck between medium rare and medium. So good, 130, 135 is when I pull it. You let it rest for usually the same amount of time as you cook it so that all the juices can go back up into the meat. I'm just going to continue to baste it. Now let's just take a peek on the other side to make sure it's not burning, getting too overcooked. And if you don't want to watch it, you can easily throw it into a oven at about 350 to 400 degrees for about 5 to 6 minutes. It'll cook at the same temperature, but you just won't have to watch it if that's just your type of cooking. At the restaurant, we have to watch it, so we throw it in the oven for a minute or two as we're cooking other meats. And then, we just continue to baste and continue to baste. And even flip it over and baste this side. But as you're basting, when we had it flipped over like this, as you baste, the bottom of the duck still cooks just because, you're on heat. So I go based off a touch when I cook my duck just because, don't have time to always stick a thermometer in the meat. So, that's just the tool that I've been comfortable with. If you feel comfortable with a thermometer, you want to get it, stick it in, and you want to get to the thickest part because that's the part that's going to take the longest to cook. So then you'll know if it's done or not when you stick it into the thickest part of the bird. And so this feels pretty good to me. I'm going to cut the heat. I'm going to take the duck breast. And I'm going to set it on my cutting board and let it rest. So we have a tamale that we serve this with. It's stuffed with guadalacoche, poblano, onions, epazote, just a very flavorful tamale. And then it comes with a maple pepita sauce that we make in-house at Owamni, and wajapi to add the fruitiness to pair well with the duck breast. And other things that, you could eat with the duck are, you could do wild rice, some kind of corn, just because, corn and duck go good together. So now that the duck has rested for about 10 minutes, you're going to take it and you're going to find the grain. The grains usually run this way. So we're going to go against the grain and just kind of, slice it at a bias. And, it's a perfect medium rare medium, just how I love it. And, if you want to leave them whole, you can. For our restaurant, we prefer to slice it just so people can see, it's a shared dish, but it's also, they can see the temperature on the duck. They can see, just all the layers of fat and color. And, can't go wrong with duck just because, it's very flavorful. It's very lean when you render out all the fat. And, it's just one of my favorite birds to eat. No salt needed because of that brine. The flavor of the blueberries coming out, the flavor of the juniper berries coming out, the hint of onion. You have a hint of garlic, sage. It's spot on. All right, guys, we found a little straggler in this market. We have Jackie here. She's going to taste the duck.
Yum.
So here we have duck breast that has been brined in a blueberry and juniper berry brine for 24 hours. It has onion, sage, garlic, salt, maple, all indigenous ingredients.
Oh, man. That is so good.
Didn't even add salt when I cooked it.
I love duck. It's like one of my favorite birds to eat, but
Same.
ooh, I don't even know. I'm speechless. It's super juicy. It's so tender as well.
And that's what the brine does. The brine helps tenderize it, makes it that juiciness, and adds the flavor to it.
I really love the caramelization and the char on the duck too. But that is, yeah. Can you make some for me?
Of course, anytime. Just come on over to Owamni.
Cool, awesome.
No, thank you.
Well, I was just thinking more you just come to my house and you can.
Well, do that too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome.